Hi guys and welcome to Crazy Pepper Revenge. This channel is all about crazy true stories, stuff that happens in real life when things get a little bit messy, people dealing with drama, cheating, lies, breakups, and even revenge. Some stories are wild, some are emotional, but all of them will keep you watching. If you like real talk and real situations, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stick around. This is Crazy Pepper Revenge, where the stories get spicy.
If you're so perfect together, they'll stay together. Without me.
I'm 29 years old, and what happened on Valentine's Day this year still feels completely surreal. Writing it down helps me process the whole insane situation. My girlfriend Melissa and I had been dating for almost 2 years, and we'd been living together in her apartment for about 6 months. The lease was in her name, which made financial sense at the time, since she'd already been living there. I'd booked reservations at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown 2 months ahead, because Valentine's Day reservations fill up incredibly fast. It wasn't crazy expensive, but nice enough that you couldn't just walk in without planning ahead. February 14th arrived. Around 5 in the evening, I started getting ready for our romantic dinner. I put on my pressed dress shirt, added cologne, made sure everything looked good. The whole routine. Melissa was in the bathroom doing her makeup, and she looked absolutely gorgeous. She had on this red dress I'd never seen before, probably bought specifically for tonight. I told her she looked amazing. She thanked me casually, then mentioned almost as an afterthought that she'd invited someone else to join us for dinner. I stopped what I was doing completely. Who could she possibly have invited to our Valentine's dinner? She explained it was her work husband from the office. He'd recently gone through a bad breakup, and she didn't want him spending Valentine's Day alone. Then she asked if I minded, but the way she asked made it clear it wasn't really a question seeking my actual opinion. I tried to explain that Valentine's Day was supposed to be for couples, just the two of us spending romantic time together. She rolled her eyes while putting on lipstick and told me not to be one of those jealous, insecure boyfriends that she couldn't stand. She emphasized that he was literally just a friend, a work friend, and it was incredibly sad for anyone to be alone on Valentine's. I pointed out that we'd never even met this person before. She assured me I'd love him once I met him, describing him as super funny and really sweet. Then she added that I was secure enough not to be weird about it, right? The way she phrased it felt like a direct challenge, like if I objected, I'd be proving I was insecure and controlling. I reluctantly agreed, already feeling like an idiot for caving to the pressure. We arrived at the restaurant at 7 o'clock sharp. He was already waiting outside the entrance. This guy was tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", wearing what was obviously an expensive designer suit and a watch that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He hugged Melissa for what felt like an uncomfortably long time, and I specifically noticed his hands were positioned on her lower back. Way too familiar for a supposed work friend. When he turned to me, he grinned and said I must be the boyfriend he'd heard about. He shook my hand with one of those aggressive grips that some men do to establish dominance and show superiority. He thanked me for letting him crash our date and said he really appreciated it. The phrasing irritated me immediately because I hadn't actually given permission for any of this to happen. The hostess looked genuinely confused when she saw 3 people for what was clearly supposed to be a romantic 2-person Valentine's reservation. But she maintained her professional composure and seated us anyway. Melissa and this guy slid into one side of the booth together, sitting close, while I sat completely alone on the opposite side. Right from the start, I felt like the third wheel at my own Valentine's dinner that I'd planned and paid for. And that's exactly how they treated me for the next hour and a half straight. They talked exclusively to each other about their office environment, their inside jokes, some complicated project they were collaborating on, and their boss, who was apparently a complete nightmare to work for. They reminisced about a time they had to work late into the evening and ordered Thai food together, laughing about some incident with spring rolls. I attempted to contribute to the conversation by mentioning a similar situation that had happened at my job. Melissa cut me off mid-sentence, literally telling me to hold that thought, before turning back to him to continue their story about a presentation where the projector had died at the worst possible moment. They both laughed hysterically. I just sat there feeling invisible. When the waiter came to take drink orders, they selected an expensive bottle of wine without even glancing at me or asking my opinion on the selection. Melissa ordered the lobster ravioli, which was one of the priciest items on the menu, He ordered the most expensive ribeye steak available. I went for the cheapest option I could find, a basic New York strip, because I was beginning to realize where this evening was headed financially and I was getting angry. Melissa didn't even glance at me when I ordered. She was too busy laughing at something her coworker had said, touching his arm while she laughed. The food arrived after about 20 minutes and things got significantly worse. They started feeding each other bites from their plates like a couple on a date. Melissa never offered me any of her lobster ravioli, which she usually did because she knew how much I loved seafood and she'd normally share. But she giggled when he cut a piece of his ribeye and placed it on her plate with his fork. I ate my steak in complete silence, just chewing and watching this bizarre scene unfold. The steak was actually pretty good quality, perfectly cooked, but I couldn't enjoy it while watching my girlfriend essentially on a romantic date with another man right in front of me while I paid for it. The check came eventually. The waiter placed it in the center of the table, right between all of us. Nobody moved to grab it. They just kept talking and laughing about work stories. Finally, Melissa glanced at it briefly and asked me if I could get the whole thing. I asked if she meant the entire bill, including his meal. She said yes, obviously, pointing out it was Valentine's Day and I was going to pay anyway, so what's the difference? I clarified that I'd planned to pay for the two of us, not for him as well. Her expression changed immediately. Her face got tight and angry. She asked if I was seriously being this way right now and told me not to be cheap, reminding me in a harsh tone that he was going through a really hard time with his breakup. I responded that if he was going through such a hard time, he could still afford to pay for his own $50 steak. The guy raised his hands defensively and offered to Venmo me his portion if it was such a big deal to me. I said it actually was a big deal. Melissa kicked me hard under the table, hard enough to hurt, and hissed at me to stop embarrassing her in public. I looked at the check carefully. The total was $240. My steak had only cost $32. I pulled out two $20 bills from my wallet and threw them on the table, announcing clearly that covered my meal and a tip for the waiter. Melissa's voice got loud, almost shouting, demanding to know what I thought I was doing. I stood up slowly from the booth and looked at both of them. They were sitting there like an actual couple, side by side, staring up at me like I was the one ruining their perfect evening together. I told them they looked great together. Really great, actually. Perfect for each other. Then I said I was breaking up with Melissa right now. Her mouth fell completely open in shock. She asked what I meant. I repeated that I was breaking up with her, that we were done, over, finished. She asked in disbelief if I was seriously ending our 2-year relationship over this, over her just being nice to someone, going through a hard time. I clarified I was ending it because she'd brought another man to our Valentine's dinner, completely ignored me for 2 straight hours like I didn't exist, and then expected me to pay for her romantic date with him. I said yes, I was ending it over exactly that. Then I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. I could hear her calling my name repeatedly, but I kept walking toward the exit. I got an Uber back to her apartment, where all my belongings were stored. The driver tried making small conversation, but I wasn't in the mood. I spent the next 3 hours in a complete fury, packing in everything I owned into boxes and bags. Clothes, laptop, gaming console, books, bathroom supplies, toiletries, everything that belonged to me. I called my buddy Derek, who owned a pickup truck. He showed up at midnight without asking a single question about what was happening or why I needed help so urgently. He just asked if I was okay. I told him no, I wasn't okay, but that I would be eventually. We loaded all my stuff into his truck bed. I left my apartment key on the kitchen counter where Melissa would find it. We drove to Derek's place across town. He had a spare bedroom that I'd crashed in before moving in with Melissa. I didn't sleep much that night. My phone kept buzzing constantly with incoming texts from Melissa. Her messages started coming in rapid succession. Where did I go? Was I seriously doing this right now? She demanded I come back so we could talk about this like adults. I was overreacting massively. He was just a friend, nothing more. I was being incredibly dramatic and embarrassing. The messages kept coming every few minutes until I finally blocked her number around 3 in the morning because I desperately needed to get some sleep. That was 4 days ago from when I first wrote this down. I'd been staying at Derek's place and actively looking for apartments to rent. The weird part was I didn't even feel particularly sad about the breakup. I just felt angry and strangely relieved, like a heavy weight had lifted off my shoulders. 3 days after Valentine's Day, Melissa showed up at my workplace unannounced. She just walked right into the office reception area and asked for me by name at the front desk. My coworker, Steve, came to my desk looking really uncomfortable and told me there was a woman in reception claiming it was urgent that she speak with me. I walked out to the lobby, and there she stood with red, swollen eyes and no makeup on her face. She looked like she'd been crying for hours straight. She immediately said we needed to talk right now. I told her no, we didn't need to talk at all. She insisted I couldn't just throw away 2 years of a relationship over a simple misunderstanding. I said it wasn't a misunderstanding whatsoever. She'd brought another guy to our Valentine's dinner knowing exactly what she was doing. The receptionist was pretending to be busy with paperwork, but was obviously listening to every single word we said. This was becoming a whole spectacle in my workplace. Melissa said he'd needed a friend desperately, and I was making it into something it wasn't. I responded that I'd needed a girlfriend who didn't treat me like I was completely invisible, and I guess neither of us got what we needed. She said she loved me. I told her she had a really weird way of showing love. She started crying harder, much harder, tears streaming down her face. She begged me to just get coffee with her somewhere so she could explain everything properly. I said there was nothing to explain, that she'd made her choice and I was completely fine with it. She called me cold and heartless. I said I wasn't being cold. I was being done with her. And there was a significant difference between those two things. I told her she needed to leave my workplace immediately. Security was already walking toward us from across the lobby. She saw them approaching and turned back to me, saying this wasn't over between us. I told her it was definitely over. She left quickly. My boss pulled me aside afterward in the hallway and asked if everything was okay with me. I apologized for the scene and explained it was my ex-girlfriend causing unnecessary drama. He said no worries at all and just wanted to make sure I was handling things all right. I appreciated that at least someone at work cared about how I was doing with everything. Later that same day, I got a text from an unknown number. I answered because I thought it might be about one of the apartments I'd recently applied for. The message said, "Hey man, it's me from the dinner the other night." The work husband. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I asked how the hell he got my number. He said he got it from Melissa's phone when she wasn't looking. He suggested we should grab a beer somewhere and clear the air between us. I told him absolutely not, no chance. He insisted we were both mature adults and that Melissa really cared about me deeply, that he'd just been being a supportive friend to her. I asked if being supportive meant letting her feed him expensive food and not offering to pay for his own expensive meal. He said she'd offered to share her food, and what was he supposed to do? Refuse her? The audacity and entitlement of this guy was absolutely unbelievable. I told him they could both do whatever they wanted now that I was completely out of the picture, and I instructed him to delete my number immediately. He had the nerve to say I was making a huge mistake, that Melissa was a great girl. I told him he should date her himself then. I blocked that number immediately without waiting for a response. This is where things got really interesting. Derek, my friend who'd helped me move all my stuff, works in tech doing cybersecurity stuff for a living. After I told him about the work husband texting me, he got curious and asked what the guy's name was. I realized Melissa had never actually mentioned his name during the entire dinner or at any point. Derek said he'd do some research and that he knew someone who worked at Melissa's company. 2 days later, he came back with information that absolutely floored me. The work husband wasn't just a regular coworker at all. He was Melissa's direct supervisor, her actual boss who controlled her work assignments and career advancement. I'd spent Valentine's Day watching my girlfriend on a romantic date with the person who had power over her professional life. Everything started making perfect sense. The expensive designer suit, the luxury watch, the confidence, the way he carried himself with authority. This wasn't some random work friend she'd become close with. This was someone with legitimate power over her career, and they'd been spending enough time together that she felt comfortable calling him her work husband and bringing him to our Valentine's dinner without seeing any problem with it. Yesterday, I got another text from Melissa, this time from a completely different phone number. The message said she knew I'd blocked her previous number, but she begged me to please read what she had to say. She admitted she'd made a terrible mistake and taken me for granted during our relationship. She missed me intensely and thought about me constantly. That night meant nothing to her in retrospect. He meant nothing to her as a person. I was the one she actually wanted to be with long term. She pleaded desperately for another chance to make things right. I didn't respond to the message, but I took screenshots of everything she sent. I had a strong feeling I might need documentation of all this later for some reason. Then, today she posted something on social media. One of those intentionally vague posts about how you eventually realize who really has your back and who's just using you for their own benefit. About how trust is everything in life, and some people show their true colors when things get difficult. She ended it by saying she deserves so much better than how she'd been treated. The comments section exploded within minutes, with her friends jumping in to support her. They were saying things like, "You absolutely do deserve better, Queen, and definitely his loss." Not knowing any context whatsoever about what had actually happened between us. Not one single person asked what had actually occurred. It was just automatic blind support for their friend. My phone started blowing up within an hour. Friends of friends were messaging me, asking what I'd done to her. Mutual acquaintances were reaching out with messages like, "Dude, what the hell happened with you two?" I decided if we were doing this publicly on social media, I'd set the record straight with facts. I posted my own statement, keeping it simple and completely factual. I explained I'd broken up with my ex after she invited her boss to our Valentine's dinner, ignored me the entire night like I wasn't there, expected me to pay for both of them, then called me dramatic and jealous for leaving the restaurant. That was the whole story in a nutshell. The reaction shifted pretty quickly once people knew the truth. People started asking questions in the comments. Wait, what? Her boss was there? The tone changed completely within an hour. Melissa deleted her original post within an hour, but the damage was already done. Now, everyone in our social circle knew what had actually happened. I was completely fine with that. I wanted people to know the real truth. I wasn't the villain in the situation like she was trying to portray. I looked at a studio apartment the next day. It was small, really small actually, but it was mine and mine alone. My own space where I wouldn't feel like a guest living in someone else's home. I wouldn't be living in someone else's apartment under someone else's rules anymore. Derek asked me if I regretted how I'd handled everything. I told him I should have recognized the red flags much earlier in the relationship, but no, I didn't regret walking out of that restaurant. It was the best decision I could have possibly made. 2 weeks passed. I'd signed the lease on the studio apartment the previous week and moved in over the weekend with Derek's help. The place was tiny, barely big enough for one person, but it felt like complete freedom. Derek helped me move my stuff from his spare room to my new place. We grabbed pizza afterward at a place nearby, and he filled me in on what he'd been hearing through the grapevine. Things were apparently very messy at Melissa's office currently. I asked how messy exactly. He said, human resources level messy, official investigations. Someone had reported the relationship between Melissa and her supervisor to HR. Specifically, they'd reported the Valentine's dinner incident as evidence. Someone from their company had seen them together at the restaurant, recognized them both, and filed a formal complaint about inappropriate workplace relationships between supervisor and subordinate. I asked if they actually had something romantic going on beyond just friendship. Derek said that's exactly what HR was investigating now, whether it was just inappropriate closeness or if they'd actually crossed professional and ethical lines that violated company policy. I felt vindicated, but also somehow worse at the same time. I'd suspected something was off between them, but hearing it confirmed through an official investigation hit differently. But it got even more complicated quickly. Melissa showed up at my new apartment unannounced. I have absolutely no idea how she got my new address. I suspected she'd called my mom or something because they'd always gotten along really well. She knocked on my door around 8 in the evening on a Tuesday. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there looking distressed. I didn't open the door initially. I asked through the closed door what she wanted. She begged me to let her in, saying we desperately needed to talk. I told her we really didn't need to talk about anything. Then she said something that made me pause. She'd lost her job. I opened the door, but stood blocking the doorway with my body. I didn't let her inside my apartment. I asked what had happened at work. She looked absolutely terrible. Her hair was messy and unwashed. Her clothes were wrinkled like she'd slept in them. And her eyes were puffy from crying for hours. She told me they'd fired her, that she'd violated company policy, and that it was entirely my fault this happened. I asked how it could possibly be my fault. She said I'd told people about him, about our Valentine's dinner, and someone had reported them to HR. Now they were both fired and unemployed. I clarified that I hadn't reported anything to anyone at her company. I'd simply told people the truth about what happened when she'd posted about me on social media first. She insisted it was the same thing, that I'd ruined her entire career and she could sue me for damages. I asked what she planned to sue me for exactly, telling the truth about what happened. She said for maltreatment and defamation of character. At that exact moment, a neighbor's door opened down the hall. An elderly man peered out and asked if everything was okay out here. I told him, yes, sir, that she was just leaving right now. Melissa looked at the neighbor, then back at me, and lowered her voice significantly. She said she had nothing now. No job, couldn't afford her apartment rent, and it was all because of what I'd done. I told her it was because of her own choices and actions. She'd made them consciously, now she had to deal with the consequences like an adult. She said she couldn't believe I was being so cruel and heartless, that she thought I'd loved her. I told her I had loved her, past tense. She'd eliminated that love when she prioritized her boss over me on Valentine's Day. She said he wasn't her boss anymore, that they were both unemployed now because of me. I told her that still wasn't my problem to solve. She asked where she was supposed to go now, what she was supposed to do without a job. I told her to figure it out the same way I'd had to figure out where to live when I'd moved out of her apartment 3 weeks ago with no notice. She tried to physically push past me into my apartment. She actually put her hands on my chest and tried to shove her way inside. I held the door firm with my weight and told her she needed to leave immediately or I'd call police. She begged to just stay there for one night, claiming she had nowhere else to go at all. I said that was unfortunate, but still absolutely no. The neighbor called out again, asking if I wanted him to call the police. Melissa's eyes went wide with panic. She stepped back quickly and said, fine, she'd leave. She added that she hoped I was happy, that I'd destroyed her entire life. I responded that she'd invited her boss to our Valentine's dinner and destroyed her own life through her choices. I just stopped participating in it. She left quickly and I could hear her crying in the hallway as she walked away. I felt bad for maybe 2 seconds, then remembered watching her giggle while feeding him her lobster ravioli while I sat there completely alone and ignored at my own Valentine's dinner. The next day I got a call from a number with my hometown area code. It was my mom calling. She said Melissa had called her and told her I'd kicked Melissa out of my apartment and now she was homeless on the streets. I explained that wasn't what happened at all. I'd left Melissa's apartment 3 weeks ago of my own choice. She'd gotten fired from her job for inappropriate conduct with her supervisor, and that was entirely on her own actions. My mom said Melissa had made it sound like I'd thrown her out into the cold winter with nowhere to go. I explained the whole situation in detail to my mother. Melissa had brought her boss to our Valentine's dinner, completely ignored me, expected me to pay for both of them, and I'd walked out. Then I'd found out they'd been inappropriate at work and HR had gotten involved in an investigation. None of that was my fault whatsoever. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a moment. Then my mom said, "Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That's absolutely awful treatment." I told her it was fine, that I was fine now, and I'd gotten my own place and was moving forward. My mom mentioned that Melissa had also asked if she could stay with my parents for a while, claiming I'd actually suggested it as an option. The absolute nerve of this woman was unbelievable. I told my mom I absolutely had not suggested that, and begged her not to let Melissa guilt trip her into anything. My mom assured me not to worry, that she'd already told Melissa no immediately. My dad wouldn't have allowed it anyway, and he'd been suspicious when Melissa called in the first place. I thank my mom for actually listening to my side of the story instead of just believing Melissa. But there was more drama, because of course there was. I got a message request on social media from the boss, or ex-boss now, I supposed. He said we should talk about this situation, and that things had gotten completely out of hand. He was willing to admit they may have crossed some professional boundaries, but my reaction had caused real damage to real people's lives and careers. People had lost their jobs over this. He suggested we could resolve this situation like mature adults. I immediately screenshot the message and sent it to Derek. Derek texted back saying this guy was clearly trying to blame me for their own mess and asked if I was going to respond. I asked if I should. Derek said, hell no, the guy was looking for someone to blame, and I shouldn't give him any ammunition to use against me. I didn't respond to the message. I just blocked him too on all platforms. Last night, Melissa posted a long, rambling video on her social media stories. I watched it through a fake account that Derek had made for monitoring purposes. She was crying in the video, talking about how people show their true colors during hard times, how the person she thought loved her had abandoned her when she needed him most, and how men will ruin your life, then act like they're the sufferer instead. There was zero accountability for her own actions whatsoever. Zero mention of why any of this had actually happened in the first place. Just pure victimhood and blame shifting to others. The comments were split down the middle. Some people were buying into her narrative completely without question, but others were calling her out because the truth had already spread through our mutual friends network. Someone commented asking, "Didn't you cheat with your boss, though?" She deleted the entire story within minutes of that comment. I was done engaging with any of it at all. I blocked her on every single social media platform. I changed my phone number completely and only gave the new one to people I actually trusted. I told my mom explicitly not to share any information about me with Melissa, under any circumstances whatsoever. Things at work were going really well, surprisingly. My boss had appreciated how professionally I'd handled the situation when Melissa showed up at the office causing a scene. I'd been getting lunch with coworkers more frequently, actually building real work friendships for the first time. One woman from the accounting department, Natasha, and I had been talking quite a bit lately. Nothing serious or romantic yet, just really nice to have normal, healthy conversations with someone who seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say as a person. The studio apartment was slowly coming together into an actual home. I'd gotten a couch from a thrift store downtown. It was pretty ugly, and the pattern was hideous, but it was comfortable, and it was mine. Derek brought over his old television that he'd recently upgraded from. I was slowly building a life that actually belonged to me. I finally received the lease agreement from Melissa's apartment through email. Turns out she'd kept me off the official lease the entire time we lived together, even though I'd been paying her cash for my portion of rent every single month. I'd never signed anything official or legal, so legally, I'd never been on the hook for any rent obligations. That was fortunate because I'd heard through mutual friends that she was already several months behind on payments. Not my circus, not my monkeys anymore. 1 month had passed since Valentine's Day. This would be my final update because I needed to close this chapter of my life completely and move forward. The situation with Melissa's apartment had resolved itself. She'd gotten evicted officially. I heard about it through a mutual friend who still talked to her occasionally. Apparently, without her job income, she couldn't make monthly rent payments. She fell behind 3 full months, and her landlord started formal eviction proceedings. She somehow got my new phone number and tried calling me. I didn't answer. She left a long, desperate voicemail. In the voicemail, she said she knew I'd changed my number, but she'd gotten the new one from my mom. She begged me not to be mad at my mom, admitting she'd lied and said it was a medical emergency. She went on about how she was in real trouble now, that they were kicking her out of the apartment, that she had nowhere to go at all. Her parents wouldn't help her financially. Her friends were all busy with their own lives and couldn't take her in. I was the only person who'd ever really cared about her. She asked if she could please just stay with me for a few weeks, promising she'd sleep on the couch. And I wouldn't even know she was there in the apartment. I deleted the voicemail without even finishing listening to it. I changed my phone number again immediately that same day. I called my mom and told her what had happened. My mom felt absolutely terrible about it. She said Melissa had told her I was in the hospital with an emergency and she would never have given out my number otherwise. I told my mom it was completely fine, that I'd just update everyone I trusted with my new number. The important thing was, my mom understood what kind of manipulative person Melissa really was now. Here's the part I didn't see coming at all. That woman from accounting I'd mentioned, Natasha, we'd been getting coffee together regularly and talking during lunch breaks most days. She was intelligent, funny, had her life completely together. We went on an actual date the previous week. We had dinner at a nice place. Good conversation that flowed naturally without any awkwardness. At the end of the meal, she paid for her own portion without me even having to ask or suggest splitting. Imagine that basic courtesy. At the end of the evening, she said something that really stuck with me. She mentioned she'd heard about what happened with my ex, the whole Valentine's situation. She wanted me to know she thought I'd handled it really well. She said a lot of guys would have made it overly dramatic or tried to get revenge somehow, but I'd just walked away with dignity. That took real strength in her opinion. I told her I hadn't felt strong at the time at all. Actually, I'd felt kind of pathetic and stupid. She disagreed completely. She said it wasn't pathetic at all. I'd respected myself enough to leave immediately when I recognized blatant disrespect. That was huge and showed character. We were taking things slow between us. No rushing into anything, no pressure to define things. Just seeing where things naturally went. Meanwhile, Melissa had completely spiraled, according to what I'd heard from mutual friends. She'd been couch surfing between various friends' places for weeks, and they were getting tired of hosting her indefinitely. Her and the former boss weren't together romantically. Apparently, once they'd both lost their jobs, whatever they'd had between them fell apart almost immediately. Turned out it had been all workplace proximity and the excitement of something forbidden and taboo. Melissa had been applying for jobs constantly, but her termination from her last position was making it incredibly difficult to find employment. Companies listed it as violation of company policy on her record, which served as a major red flag for potential new employers doing background checks. She'd posted on social media asking for financial assistance for someone going through hard times. She got absolutely dragged in the comments section. People were asking why she didn't just get a regular job, while others brought up the Valentine's Day story specifically. She deleted that post quickly too. Her parents had finally agreed to let her move back home with them temporarily. They lived in a different state several hours away. She was apparently leaving this coming weekend. You know what I felt about all of it? Absolutely nothing at all. No satisfaction in her suffering, no sympathy for her situation, no lingering anger or resentment, just complete and total indifference. It was over and I'd moved on with my life. I'd gotten my studio apartment fully furnished at this point. It was small, but it was entirely mine. I had plants on the windowsill getting sunlight. My gaming setup was arranged properly in the corner. The kitchen was barely functional with minimal counter space, but I was teaching myself to cook properly. Meal prepping on Sundays had become my new routine, and I was actually enjoying the process. Work gave me a small raise the previous week unexpectedly. My boss said I'd been showing increased focus and professionalism lately. It's funny how that happens when you're not constantly stressed about relationship problems and drama. Natasha from accounting and I were going out again this coming weekend. She wanted to try this new Thai restaurant that had opened recently downtown. She said she was paying for dinner since I'd covered the first date. I didn't argue with her about it. It was genuinely nice being with someone who actually wanted to contribute equally and share responsibility instead of expecting me to pay for everything. Looking back at Valentine's Day, at that specific moment in the restaurant, when I made the decision to walk away, I realized that was the first time I'd actually stood up for myself in that entire relationship. I probably should have done it much sooner, honestly. The red flags had been there all along if I'd been willing to see them clearly. Like how Melissa always needed me to pay for things but would get defensive and angry if I ever mentioned the financial imbalance. How her friends were always more important than spending quality time together as a couple. How she'd share intimate details about our private relationship with her coworkers, including him specifically. How she'd prioritize looking good on social media over actually being happy in real life with me. I'd ignored all of it because I thought that's what compromise looked like in a healthy relationship. Turns out real compromise is mutual and balanced. What I'd been doing was simply accepting far less than I deserved as a basic human being. Someone had commented on my original post asking if I regretted being as harsh as I was with Melissa. The truth is, no, I didn't regret it at all. She needed to face real consequences for her actions and choices, not because I was being vindictive or cruel, but because her own choices were finally catching up to her naturally. I just stopped shielding her from the natural results of her own behavior. The job situation, the apartment eviction, her friends getting tired of her, all of it stemmed directly from choices she'd made consciously and deliberately. Choices she'd made while knowing better the whole time. She knew bringing her boss to our Valentine's dinner was wrong. She did it anyway because she wanted to. She knew spending excessive company time, developing an inappropriate relationship with her supervisor was wrong and against policy. She did it anyway because she enjoyed the attention. I wasn't responsible for fixing the mess she'd created for herself through her own actions. Derek asked me last night if I'd consider taking her back if she came crawling back with genuine apologies and promises to change. I said not a chance, not even a remote possibility. Even if she was genuinely sorry, which I seriously doubted, she'd only be sorry that she got caught and lost her job. She'd be sorry that she was facing real consequences for once. She wouldn't actually be sorry for what she'd done to me in our relationship. That's a critical difference that matters. Derek nodded and said that was fair enough. Then he asked if this was really it, if this was the end of the whole story. Just a regular guy who got disrespected on Valentine's Day, walked away from it, and rebuilt his life from scratch. No dramatic confrontation, no elaborate revenge plot. I told him yes, that was it exactly. Just a regular person who decided he deserved basic respect and human dignity, then acted accordingly when he wasn't receiving it from his partner. Natasha texted me earlier today asking if I was allergic to anything before Saturday's dinner. That's the kind of thoughtful consideration I should have had all along in a relationship. Someone who actually gives a damn about small details and thinks about others. To everyone who followed this entire situation and offered support and advice, thank you genuinely. For everyone asking if I went too far or was too harsh with how I handled things, I didn't. I simply stopped going along with unacceptable treatment of me as a person. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just letting someone experience the natural consequences of their own actions and choices while you move forward with your own life. To Melissa, if you somehow end up reading this at some point, I genuinely hope you figure your life out and learn from this experience. Just not with me. Never with me again. That door's permanently closed and locked. I'm done with that chapter completely, and I'm building something much better for myself now.